Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on my third episode of podcast. So today the topic is code reviews. At my current company, I have reviewed quite some PRs and over time I have learned few lessons. So I would be happy to share those lessons with you guys. So let's start. So before we jump into those lessons, I would like to give you a brief overview of what code review is. So let's imagine you are working on a task. Um, Maybe you are fixing a bug, or maybe you are building a completely new feature. So you are preparing your solution, and then you are presenting your solution to your peers so that they can review your code. This is done typically by opening a PR. So the overall process where you are presenting your solution to your peer and then they will be providing you feedback is called peer review. Oh, sorry, code review. So when I started working on, let's say, implementing any new feature or fixing a bug, I had an impression that code review is mainly about catching a bug. But I got awareness by one of the very nice podcast. I will be sharing a link with you guys in the description. And uh, so code review is not only about catching a bugs. It's actually about discussing solution with your peers. So for example, based on my experience, I have seen sometimes that even though we have gone through the review process, despite the fact that we have seen a few issues in production system. So code review is about, you can say, sharing knowledge with your peer, sharing domain knowledge, maybe transferring some of the knowledge. Let's say you have a new joiner, and then every team has some culture, some way of writing code, some standards, and then you are actually communicating those via code reviews. And yeah, so as I mentioned, it's not solely about catching a bug, but it's actually about discussion, opening a healthy discussion. So now let's jump into the lessons which I have learned over time. So the very first lesson: review your code first before you ask your peers to review it. So this is I would say, time saver for your peers, because it is quite possible that whenever you are implementing a solution, you may add some rough variables or left some remarks or comments, and it's not yet finalized. So when you are presenting a solution, it's always good that you review your code first. It's like when you are sending emails, you are preparing a draft, and then once before you sending a email to the concerned person, you are always reviewing it. Before you are presenting a presentation for your final year project or thesis, you are always reviewing it for some silly mistakes or code. So this applies the same here. It's a very underrated point, but I would highly encourage it. The thing is that the more feedback, the back and forth loop you have while this whole review process, the feedback gets less effective over time, and the reviewers are highly possible that overlook some of the mistakes which you have made and can be easily caught if you don't do these mistakes. Then comes know you attitude while providing a feedback. So for example, I don't like it when a person write a comment, hey, why haven't you closed the connection? It's so impolite, it's not like I have done it on purpose. I'm not saying that my peers are like that, but it's just a journal thing which I have learned over time. So what you can do is you can rephrase the same statement as, hey, as per my understanding, this code is not closing the connection. So you are not actually finger pointing the person who wrote a code, but actually you are emphasizing on the code itself, so there is a big difference. And it's always nice to add emojis because this reflects the understanding, like some kind of a politeness, I would say. Another thing which I noticed is it's quite common that you directly command, hey, please do this. This is a very bad. Always ask questions. So when you are raising a questions, you are just sharing your own opinion, and it is quite possible that the other person can disagree with you, and then he or she can answer you, and then everything would be fine. So for example, here is a very nice example. Do you think it would be a good idea to surround this code block with try catch? So it's just an opinion. Maybe the person disagree with you and he has a very nice and good justification for that. So it's always again healthy discussion and not commanding it. This is my favorite part. I love this point a lot, and I learned this again from that specific podcast which I mentioned earlier. I will definitely share this link in the description. So when I started earlier in my career, I was just writing the commit message. That's it. So when a person who is reviewing your solution, he may not have a complete picture. He may not know what the underlying context is. So when you are adding the description, then you are actually not communicating the domain knowledge, but also reasoning about, like it's actually helping the reviewer to reason about your solution. Maybe the solution which you have written or which you have provided is not optimal, and when you are sharing these concerns, these reasons, he can provide a better solution based on the specific problem. So I love this point. For example, here is on the left hand side you can see the template. Let's say ticket ID and then your commit message, and then goes the reason, and reason is actually a commit description. So for example, let's say you are migrating CI/CD pipeline from Jenkins to GitHub. There is a specific reason. Why are you doing this? So maybe the reason could be moving away from Jenkins to GitHub to reduce maintenance overhead. So maybe it's common that everybody knows what's going on in the team, but at least you are communicating this information, and it serves kind of a documentation. Maybe another nice point about this particular point is that, let's say today you are making some decisions and you are doing something. Maybe after 5 years, it may not be relevant at all. And when the other person is reviewing the commit history, he may know, this is the reason why this change was made, and now this particular point is not valid anymore. Let's clean it up. So you are actually conveying this information to not the current or your current employer or colleagues, but future employees as well. So I love this point actually. So there was a time when I initially started working as a full-time employee, and then I created a very long PR. So which has, let's say, 12 commits or whatsoever, like high number of commits. I can't recall exactly how many commits were there, but it's always kind of a good balance, number of commits versus context you are providing in your commit. So the more code you are throwing to the reviewer, it's very likely that you won't get effective or fruitful feedback. So you are actually overwhelmed reviewer to review a high number of lines, and it's very likely that he or she overlook different changes. So best is to find a good balance by you can say uh, providing the context versus number of commits. That's my opinion. And okay, so there was a time when I was a very beginner and I don't know that much Scala. So my colleagues were writing some code and it was really hard for me to understand this functional programming, and I was mostly, or sometimes when I don't understand it, I just approve the PR without sharing my concerns. This was really bad and I learned it from my colleague, and he mentioned that it's okay if you are not able to understand something, you can always raise this concern to your peers. So there is nothing that you can't learn, there is nothing that you can't understand. Okay, it's very obvious. So when you are sharing this concern, you are actually making it transparent, and then you can communicate directly with the person who has implemented this solution, and then he or she can guide you what this particular code is doing, and maybe with your input he or she can further add clarity in the business logic, and this way you are actually contributing by this specific input. So it's okay to say, hey, I don't understand this logic, can you please help me here? And yeah, again here, know your attitude. So you cannot say, hey, the code you have written is not readable. So here I am again saying, hey, sorry, I am not able to understand this implementation, it's hard for me to follow. Know your attitude at all. So this is just a nice to have thing. So for example, when you are preparing your commit message, in the past I used to use past tense. So for example, implemented blah blah blah, fixed. But when you are adding a commit, this is actually describing that specific commit, so it's actually a present tense and it's not yet done. So this particular commit is actually doing what you are explaining, right? So that's why it's better to use present form here. It's just my recommendation, no hard and fast rule, and I have checked public repos from AWS or Google and they follow similar practice. Thank you so much. So those were the few points or lessons which I have learned so far. If you have any questions or your thoughts or whatever, please share me in the comment section below. I would be happy to answer or clarify some of the points which are not clear to you. Thanks. Until then, bye.